Thank you for that very kind response, and thank you again for being here today. We have some questions from our colleagues in the press. I think, can I first go to Rachel from the Press Association, please?
Hi there. I'm just going to ask you, are voters actually willing to hear what Labour have to say in Scotland anymore, given that they've shed votes in every Holyrood election since devolution?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that, Rachel. Could you
Are
repeat?
voters actually willing to hear what Labour have to say in Scotland anymore, given that they've shed votes in every Holyrood election since devolution?
So the result in May would tell us that an awful lot of people haven't been willing, Rachel, and we have to be honest about that. We have to be honest about the scale of the challenge that's in front of us. We have gone backwards at 6 elections in a row, so there's a lot of things to talk about what happened in May, the campaign we run, the mistakes that we made, and we have to do that. We have to do that honestly amongst ourselves as a party and answer the questions of it. But we also have to see the size of this challenge. We have gone backwards 6 elections in a row, and we have to re-find our moral purpose. We have to re-find our position, and we have to reroute ourselves in the communities which founded us across the whole of the country. I believe that is a huge task. There's no doubt about that. But I believe fundamentally, and with all of my heart, that the Scottish Labour Party remains the best vehicle for social change in this country. And I can see that in the stasis we have in Scotland, the decline in our public services, the decline in our economy, the state of our streets, the opportunities that are missed for young people of a better chance in their lives. We're still the vital vehicle that can make that change. And we have to rise to the task, because nobody else is going to do it. Thank you. Can we have Paul from the Daily Record, please?
2 questions. At the last UK Labour conference, you famously told Andy Burnham to shut up. I was just wondering, with the benefit of hindsight, if you regret those comments. And secondly, if you do win next month, will you consider Andy Burnham to be your boss?
No. Certainly the boss of me will be the members of the Scottish Labour Party who elect me, and the people to whom I'm accountable, and beyond that, the people of Scotland who I seek the role to serve. That's absolutely critical. Do I regret saying to Andy to shut up? No, I don't. I think that I said that from a place of frustration. I felt in a lot of the discussion that was ongoing around the UK leadership at the time, that this was a question of where Scotland was being ignored. And the vital election that we had ahead of us in 2026 looked potentially like it could be sacrificed for another discussion going elsewhere. And that's just not something I'll stand for. And I'll continue to make the case to Andy, to anybody else in the UK cabinet, that the interests of Scotland for me come first. First, every time. And I'll be the person, as I set out in this speech today, who is able to tell that truth to power, to talk to whether it be the government in Edinburgh or the government in London about what the people of Scotland need. And that's what the people of Scotland will always have from me. Thank you. Andrew, from the Herald.
Thanks, Michael. I'll ask you the same question I asked Joe Fagan last week. You've now got 9 months until the local council elections. You know, given the difficulties you've mentioned with the party's structures, given the disconnect between the campaign on the ground and what was going on in Party HQ, which you've spoken about before, do you think you can get Scottish Labour in a place where they are competitive next May? And following on from that, will you ditch Anna Sawar's no pacts, no deals, no coalitions, so you can have community champions, as you call them, you know, in power in Scotland, even if that means having to do deals with the Lib Dems, the Greens, the SNP, the Tories, Reform?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Andrew. I mean, I think we have to recognise that politics in Scotland has changed. And a lot of what I've just set out today is the fact that for too long we've not recognised that. We have to see where we are in the political firmament in Scotland, how at times we have become marginal in terms of the number of seats that we have in Holyrood and the challenge that that presents. We also know that essentially those elections next year are going to be 6-party politics being projected into 4- and 3-member wards. And that makes it very difficult, I think, for all of the traditional main parties, that things are going to become more fractured. So I believe, I've said this already, that we have to be open to make sure that we can do deals to deliver as best as possible for the people of Scotland and for the communities that we seek to serve. So I'll work with local authorities to make that happen, but not with reform. Absolutely clear that we can't. And I think that the reform side of this is incredibly dangerous for the country. They are a gateway to something much darker. Now, there are people who may have voted Labour in the past who voted reform in May, and we have to persuade those people that better outcomes for their young people, for the future of their communities, doesn't lie with that far-right populism that is being peddled. That we have to win that argument and try and persuade people back. That the easy enemies that they identify are no substitute for proper answers. But we have to make sure that we do not enable that politics in any way. So I can say that we are open to discussions with other parties, and we should be. We have to recognise the political arithmetic as to where it is and make sure that we put in place Labour values, Labour policies wherever we can, but not at the cost of working with people who, frankly, I think challenge the very soul of the country that we seek to represent. Okay, David from the Scotsman.
Thanks, Michael. Just on your devolution plans, can I ask what specific powers you'd like to see devolved from Westminster to the regions, and whether that is directly to councils, or you would like to see local government reorganised to better use those powers? And secondly, do you think that's going to be enough to combat the independence vote? We've seen repeatedly Labour take a hard line on independence, and it's not been effective at the ballot box. What were you going to do differently that your many predecessors have tried and failed?
Sure. Thanks, David. I think there's lots of things that could be devolved locally where powers can work. Let me give you an example. I think issues around skills and employability are ripe for change. It's actually what happens in other parts of Europe, where instead of having national priorities about the number of the areas of skills, that in parts, whether it be in Switzerland or Germany, they set regional approaches where they understand what the shape of the economy they want to build is, and they build growth through having the proper partnership between skills and investment. So the investment can come from Westminster to make that happen, if there's a finance that's available. And the Scottish Government, I think, has to be open to saying that we're going to allow different regions to actually create those opportunities. I visited Fife College just in the last few days, and we're talking about just those opportunities for the Fife economy that could come if we actually shaped the offer in those areas and did that specifically. At the moment, they're hamstrung by a government that won't give direction nationally and fails to actually provide freedom locally. And actually, that is a significant change that could begin to change outcomes for people across Scotland. And I think it's an example of the answer to your second question. If we ask people at the moment whether they favour the status quo or independence, it's basically 50-50. And I don't think, frankly, that the status quo is enough. We have to be open to more. We have to be open to a stronger Scotland in a changing UK. That's what we have to promote. But we do that by showing that we can deliver it. It's not just a case of the slogan. We can do that by showing that we can invest in communities and get results for them. So what can we do as a joint mission to drive down youth unemployment in Scotland? It's the highest in the UK. We know that people, if you don't actually deal with this issue by the age of 24, somebody most likely will never work in their life. We know the moral consequences of that for our citizens, and we know the economic consequences of it for the country. If we can pull together the UK and the Scottish Government to do that work, and I believe the Scottish Labour Party is the primary conduit that can make that happen. Because at the moment, the First Minister doesn't seem to be able to get it to happen himself. So I'm prepared to help. Okay, Michael from the Daily Mail.
Thanks very much. Just on a couple of issues, you say that you want the wealthiest and big corporations to pay more. Can you spell out a bit more about who are the wealthiest and who are big corporations that you want to pay more? And your proposals on a windfall tax on supermarkets have been quite heavily criticised. Half-baked nonsense was the way that the Scottish Retail Consortium described it. Could I ask where you stand on another big retail issue, on whether Scottish Labour under your leadership would support a food price cap?
Okay. There's a lot in there, Michael. Let me see what I can do with it. The welfare. So we know that the shape of our society is changing dramatically. I talked about demographic change in the speech. It's a massive challenge that we have that's putting additional pressure on our public services. By 2050, we know that we're going to need significantly more revenue in this country in order to pay for even vaguely comparable public services that deal with the social challenges that we have, that give people care in their old age, that allow us to give opportunities to young people and allow us to build a better economy. The challenge of that is significant. The Scottish Fiscal Commission have set out in stark terms what that picture looks like. Now, I believe that we have to make sure that we can have, yes, a conversation about how we change public services and provision, but we are going to need more resource. Anybody who thinks that we don't, frankly, is setting themselves up to a massive programme of cuts across Scotland over that period. So we have to find means of realising that resource. Now, in the last Parliament, I went to the Treasury and asked and argued, along with our Scottish Labour MPs, for that resource to come to Scotland, and we delivered additional billions of pounds for the Scottish budget as a result of that. So that's one means. But more broadly, we have to think about what our tax base is and where we get money from. So I'm open to conversations about replacements for council tax, whether it be different variations in that area. And I've already secured agreement in the Scottish Parliament for immediate talks in that area. I'm open to discussions about wealth taxes and what those might look like. None of this is easy. It's all really, really challenging. But we have to look in the long term to think about how we can do that. On your point around the retail tax that I've set out today and that we trailed over the weekend, it doesn't surprise me that big business thinks that they should keep the money that they got from the windfall from government policy. But I think it's better spent on dealing with what I think is a moral question about alcohol and drug abuse in our streets, the level of addiction. I mean, I think we all saw some of the coverage from the programme about Glasgow city centre just in the last couple of weeks, and how scared people are of some of the social consequences that are arising from that. I've seen it in Dundee. We see it right across Scotland. I think if this money can help, it's right that we actually take it and we actually spend it on things that can help people on the front line from some of the issues that are being caused by alcohol abuse in the first instance. So, Simeon. Oh, sorry, the food price cap. Yeah, sorry, that was a genuine mistake. On the food price cap, no, I'm not supportive of the food price cap. I think it's basically because it won't work. It's entirely clear that it won't work. I'm an economist by training, but I don't think you need a master's degree in economics to figure out what happens with this kind of policy. You can see it internationally where it actually restricts the availability of products. It increases prices on other products. It's not thought through. But then I don't think the SNP ever seriously thought it through. That wasn't the point of it. It was a means of of trying to create a controversy, which they were quite successful in terms of in the discussion and election campaign, rather than thinking about what it would actually mean for people. So I don't think it will work. I don't think the SNP think it will work. It's just a means of trying to have a conversation. So let's try and have a conversation about things that will work, that can make a difference to people. So thank you. And Simeon.
Thanks very much. Regarding clean energy, I just wondered if you could explain where you think there has been a lack of development in clean energy because of petty politics between London and Edinburgh. And maybe secondly, on that, you say you're willing to stand up for Scotland. So are you going to sort of challenge the Burnham government around transmission charging and challenge them about the decision not to allow Mingyang, the Chinese turbine manufacturer, to open its factory in the Highlands? Thanks.
Okay, so where have there been issues? There's certainly been issues in planning and provision. Let me give you one example of that, Simeon. So in the last term of Parliament, before the UK Labour government was elected, I found myself in a debate in Holyrood where there was around pylons in the northeast of Scotland, critical infrastructure to develop clean energy in this country. And it was about the delivery of a plan that had been agreed between the SNP and the Conservative governments. And the only person in the room who was actually arguing for that infrastructure was me. The SNP were disavowing it and the Tories were disavowing it because it was easy local populist politics. Getting that really difficult work done is absolutely critical if we're going to enable that industry. I've been speaking to a potential employer investment in the last couple of weeks on the East Coast. They desperately need a grid connection. That's one of the main things that's going to restrict whether they can deliver jobs or they can't. And it's about whether this infrastructure is put in place or isn't. Making those governments work together properly to make that happen is absolutely critical. On all occasions, if I believe that it's in Scotland's interest, I will go and I will speak to the UK government. I will work with Labour MP colleagues to make the cases I know they do every day in the interests of the communities that they represent. But we can do that both in private and if it's necessary we do it in public to have those conversations. On the specific issue of Minyang, I think that we also have to respect the fact that there are security concerns that have been expressed about the management of critical national infrastructure, that the government has taken a position on that on the best advice that they have. Frankly, I think it's irresponsible for the SNP to try and make a campaigning issue out of what is the core primary responsibility of any government, which is the protection of their people and the safety of their people. So that where there are legitimate concerns that can be raised at economic development planning, the way we deliver projects, absolutely, I'll always speak up for Scotland, and it's critical that any Scottish Labour leader does. Okay, I think that's us. Oh, sorry, Dan, apologies.
No worries. Thanks, Michael.
You weren't on my list, Dan, but anyway, you're on now.
I signed up late, to be fair, so it's probably my fault. Yeah, I was just going to ask, members in Edinburgh have raised serious concerns about the process that led to Irshad Ahmed being elected, well, winning the internal selection contest and then ultimately becoming an MSP. You know, they've said hundreds of inactive members were signed up. We understand the former leadership sort of coached him through vetting. And ultimately, you know, it cost you Martin, who I see is here today from the group. So my question is, do you share the concerns that members of Edinburgh are raising about this? And if you do become leader, will you make sure there's a proper transparent investigation of what went on?
So I've seen the media reports on those concerns that have been raised by members. I don't want to comment on them in depth, Dan, because they include issues around party staff, and that's completely inappropriate for me to be talking about those things on a stage like this. So I'll set that part to the side at the moment. Clearly, if concerns have been raised by members, they have to be addressed by the party, looked in detail, and I'm sure there'll be a very thorough response that comes to that. Okay, I've not missed anybody else, have I? Okay. There's a man here. Yes. Yeah, why one here?
So, my name is Alan. I'm standing here today because of my brother. So, I'm good morning to everyone. And your company amplifies the labour law purpose for our child. And it's just mentioned regarding the culture of cover-ups about the NHS. And then we're seeing that exactly systematically with cover-up rights here in Glasgow social work under the SNP's government. And yet, right here in Glasgow, 15 years old domestic abuse victim sought protection, a case where the criminal, my mom, was found guilty in the Glasgow Search Court just days ago. And then the Glasgow City Council social work systematically dismissed the child complaints and refused to examine the objective audio evidence and recognize their unacceptable action policy against this family and kinship care, which is me. And then while I'm deeply grateful to my MP, John Grady, and my previous MP, Martin Rose, and Dr. Zuber is here today and has been or used to actively support our casework. I'm sure that we are not the only victim in Scotland. As my friend who is a PhD has used to face
Thanks for the question, Alan. I appreciate you raising the issue. I don't know the particulars of the case, but let me speak in slightly more general terms. I know that in this country, in Scotland, there is a culture of secrecy and cover-up around public service failures. I know that partly because we've heard from senior figures in the NHS just in recent days, the retiring head of the GP Association in Scotland telling us exactly that. But I also know it from my own experience from campaigning for the LGML inquiry, for the way that victims of a rogue surgeon were treated in NHS Tayside. And I think that we know it from the work at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital that our former leader Anna Sarwar did around Millie's Law. I'd say that in the last couple of days I was listening to a podcast of around Andy Burnham's response to Hillsborough and the underlying issue in that about the way that the state treats citizens and the way that people with great injustice can be ignored and when they are seeking to have their voices heard. And it's absolutely critical that happens. I think it's endemic in Scottish society at the moment, and it's a huge priority, I think, for our public institutions to do something about it. So thank you. Thank you all for coming today. It's hugely appreciated. Thank you.